This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self.
Hey everyone, it's Rosie. I'm super excited to have my friend Chris Johnson bring her new series, The Leadership Pause, to the show. In this series, Chris is going to unpack what it means to be fully human and access the best of who we are as leaders. And each episode is going to include stories, what she refers to as nerd science, which just is music to my ears. And she will always give a deliberate practice that we can try on at the end and apply so that we can show up as more embodied learners and leaders in our life. Take a listen.
Hi, folks. To lead effectively in this time of intensity and increasing complexity requires all of us, whether you're leading a large organization, a small department, a community or church project, or even within your own family, it requires all of us to be able to work well with our energy. We know that cumulative, unaddressed stress zaps our life energy and can lead to burnout. It's a little bit like our phones today. It's as if our inner battery loses juice if we've not recharged ourselves. So beyond knowing that, because we all in fact do, that it's essential for self-care, we need to actually start a few steps back in order to move forward. So the first step we can take is learning to catch myself being myself. Well, what the heck is that? Well, let me tell you a story because I promised you I would. My bias back early in my career when I worked at the Employee Resource Center, which is an employee assistance program, today we'd call it corporate wellness, one aspect of my work was that I'd been hired to teach a stress management course in Chicago at a large, well-known financial institution. They knew they had a stress problem. Come on in, Chris, and teach us how we can handle our stress better. What you need to know is that the predominant view of stress at the time defaulted to that of the godfather of stress, Dr. Hans Selye. He basically said stress is everywhere and it's an outcome of simply living life, so there's no way around experiencing it. What was different, though, is that traditional cognitive interventions actually reinforced the prevailing belief that because stress is always around, that stress is bad. To be stressed was to be skewed in a negative direction. You needed to get a hold of stress to loosen the grip or manage the stress reactions because that trifecta of fight, flight, and freeze were believed to be the only stress responses. In fact, fight, flight, and freeze were the commonly used phrase to describe stress and the one that I'd come prepared to help the people address at the bank. Except that in prep for this work assignment, of course, it was summer here in Chicago. In prep for this work assignment, I found out that I had a problem and one that shook me up quite a bit and reflected my own inner drive for results, including having lots of stress. And ironically, it taught me a lot that I hadn't planned on learning. So let me tell you how. Remember, at this point, I had not yet learned the incredible power of pausing. So I have to admit to being driven and competitive, like a lot of leaders with ideas about what to do and where to go and how to get there. So it was Chicago in August, and over those first few weeks, as I was prepping for this presentation at the bank, I myself developed a set of painful, irritating, and very embarrassing symptoms. Big, ugly, red and rash-covered legs. They were constantly itchy to the point of flaming red bumps that screamed at me at night and kept me up. Very embarrassing. These symptoms actually went on for a few weeks, and despite the application of topical creams, I just couldn't stand it any longer, and I finally consulted my doctor. You see, I was convinced that I'd developed an allergy or at least was having an allergic reaction. They were both really good guesses, by the way, but wrong. Even though I could think of nothing physical anyway, that was any different in those last few weeks. No new detergent, no hiking trips to confront lurking poison ivy, nothing. So after conducting a series of allergy tests, thankfully I wasn't allergic to anything, the doctor concluded that I was indeed suffering from the effects of contact dermatitis, an unpleasant and painful situation that typically remits after a few weeks of treatment. This explained my symptoms. The doctor's diagnosis, however, chronic stress. I was not happy. I was totally convinced she was wrong. You see, I was decidedly not stressed. At least that was the story I was telling myself. The good doctor had the nerve then to recommend a stress management program for me, which I thought was absurd since I was just then about beginning to teach that course at the bank. I was embarrassed at her diagnosis, and I went on my way, pointedly focused on filling the Benadryl prescription she had given me, but actually not addressing the underlying stress. It took the itchy bumps just shy of a month to clear up, and all the while I was befuddled totally by my doctor's recommendation. Now, with the wisdom of hindsight, I could later see that working a couple of jobs while completing an advanced degree, buying my first house, and moving in just a few weeks beforehand had placed me on the high on the stress scale. I'd finally begun to catch myself being myself, an awareness skill that only comes about with willingness. It took me a while to get willing, just saying. However, the reality is I couldn't see my experience because A, the story I was telling myself was that I can and should be able to handle it all. So I didn't view myself as stressed out. I believed my symptoms were a sign of personal weakness. B, I believed that all my hard work, extra hours, and focus would prevail. I was very attached to my belief about working hard, though I couldn't see it at the time. This contributed to my body's manifestation of these stress symptoms. And C, I hadn't taken the time to reflect and really listen to what my body knew to be true. I was experiencing overload and my body needed more attention from me, period. Contact dermatitis, boy, did it get my attention. Shortly after I got this diagnosis, and before I actually did the presentation workshop for the bank, I ran across the book Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn. This book then became a primer for the mindfulness classes that I was trained to teach, supported by Jon's approach of simply pausing to be with whatever arose relative to stress versus attempting to manage, control, get rid of stress. I experimented with his approach and I soon found myself hooked. So I began a new leg, no pun there, but I began a new leg in my journey of working with stress and using it to grow my leadership. It's only been more recently, however, that emerging science, the neurosciences, have offered us new insights into what actually happens when we meet up with pressure and stress. It seems we're physiologically wired for more than just these three possible stress reactions, the trifecta of fight, flight, and freeze. Your stress response system is your body's built-in, factory-loaded mechanism for dealing with pressure, stress, and threat. Like a zebra out on the savannah who has caught wind of a lion on the prowl, once you perceive a threat, once your body perceives a threat, your biological survival system kicks into high gear. Floodgates open in the central nervous system, and stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, noradrenaline, oxytocin, they begin their cascade through the body, directing you towards actions that provide safety and connection versus certain death, or at least that's how it can feel. Your heart rate increases, your pupils dilate for greater visual acuity, your hearing becomes sharper, and even your visual peripheral vision increases as you scan the environment looking for additional trouble. Whether you're aware of it or not, your digestion slows to allow blood flow to your major muscle groups so you can escape the danger at hand. Your thinking, momentarily anyway, becomes hyper-focused, overridden by the threat of the moment. In time, if that threat persists, or you think it does, you'll become irrational and overwhelmed with your judgment impaired. You see, your brain can't tell if the lion in pursuit is real or not. Sounds familiar, right? Like a typical day at the office or behind your home office desk. This biological process activates your sympathetic nervous system to rev up the energetic gas into your system. The trouble is, unless you're on safari, and most of us are not, you're not likely out on the savannah fearing that the lion's going to approach. Instead, you're at the office or in the boardroom or at your child's soccer game or the PTA with screaming parents. Your centuries old fight, flight, freeze, appease reaction isn't really required in any of those situations, despite how unpleasant they may be. Your old biological reaction, your perception involved, may be hindering your best performance. That's because perception is biology. Chilean biologists Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela write in their book, The Tree of Knowledge, that perception is a continuous process of, quote, bringing forth a world that manifests itself in all our actions and in all our being, end quote. It's actually the process of living. So Hans Selye wasn't all wrong. The antidote, however, to our body's overreaction, outside the context of a real life-threatening experience, is to invoke on purpose the relaxation response, which is activated by our parasympathetic nervous system, akin to putting on the brakes to our reactions. By intentionally pausing, you can invoke the relaxation response by attuning your attention to your breath, your sensations, and full body experience. Pausing allows you to be with whatever is right now. It enables you to ask yourself, what's required in this situation? Pushing pause allows you to reset and recalibrate the stress hormones coursing through your body, reestablish your critical thinking, and relax into what's actually occurring versus reacting to fear out of what might be happening. Big difference. To pause is to notice what's typically overlooked or not seen. Despite popular opinion, we're not so great at seeing ourselves clearly as human beings. There's even a name for this tendency, confirmation bias. It's when we search for, interpret, favor, and recall information that supports our prior beliefs, values, and ways of behaving. It's invisible, and it can kill your leadership. To catch yourself being yourself, like I needed to do back with my itchy bumps, and to combat personal confirmation bias for the sake of transformation, requires self-awareness and clear seeing. Discovering just where you put your attention and what you're actually up to each day goes a long way to increasing self-awareness, which is an essential aspect of emotional intelligence. Noticing your mood and your current way of interacting with others, observing the types of questions you ask or not, and sensing the emotional tenor of a meeting will sharpen your self-awareness, that key to change, so that you have the choice to create new ways of working with yourself and others. It starts with catching yourself being yourself. So, observing what's so what now? Observing what's so, like right in front of you, is the best starting point. It helps you to let go of all that you've made up about the world. Remember my contact dermatitis, and to be present to what is actually right in front of you. It's also the first move into a more powerful way of working with your own life energy to flip the switch from pressure to power to create better outcomes. But don't be fooled. To observe what's so in how you address and work with your stress, and then to ask, so what, isn't about giving up, acquiescing, opting out, or being a worn-out doormat. It is responding effectively to the question, well, what now? By saying, I give up my resistance to what is. I'm choosing to quit fighting with myself about reality. Not easy, yet necessary and vital as a leader today. Once you catch yourself being yourself and ask, what's so what, what's now, you can begin to close the gap by developing new skills, sensibilities, and actions. You'll begin to learn to surf on those monstrous waves of complexity that we're all confronted with today. Here's your practice now, a dose of daily stress. Let's try an experiment here. We'll do it together, and you can practice throughout this month. Push pause now by taking a deep, slow breath and really feeling your breath on the inhalation through your nose. As you're breathing in, recall a daily stress from your own life. And make sure it's a junior sized or about a 5 on a 1 to 10 scale. For example, something like standing in line for your first cup of coffee at Starbucks or sitting in traffic en route to work, that kind of thing. As you bring that daily stress to mind, let yourself tune into what occurs in your body as you do so. Perhaps you notice an uptick in your heart rate, or a tightness around your eyes or jaw, or a sweatiness in your hands. Remember, you're not trying to change anything, you're simply noticing what's so. Then shift your attention and tune into your emotional response, however subtle or extreme it might be. A mild irritation or annoyance can arise, or maybe nothing, or sadness. Anything that arises, it's all fair game. Then shift again and tune in to just how you're thinking about this experience and how you're talking to yourself about it. This line is too long. What's keeping them? They're going too slow, etc. Or, don't these people know how to drive? I have a meeting and I know I'll be late. How we think and talk to ourselves, even in those small daily moments, reveals how we view stress. Our self-talk matters a lot. Tuning in to all these dimensions is key to how you'll work with your stress. So what you want to do is learn the skill of catching yourself being yourself to shift your mindset, your mood, and your effectiveness in life and leadership. So this pause, you can dose yourself by doing this every day, just choosing to tune in to a medium stress, use your breath, notice your body, your emotions, and how you're thinking. That'll go a long way to increasing your awareness and your effectiveness in life and leadership. I'm interested to know what opens up for you as you take on this practice. This whole process of leadership is actually one of taking ourselves on, of catching ourselves being ourselves. And we're here today, we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to talk about in this topic and many others, and I cover many of those areas in my book, The Leadership Pause. You can find it over on Amazon or at your favorite bookseller. And as we sign off today, remember that when we're attuned to the moment at hand, present to what's possible, whatever the moment holds, we can make our best contributions. This is power.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.